Hello and welcome. In a previous video we took a look at the BEA AEC Regal 4 deck and a half airport buses. These are the ones that look a little bit like an RF on steroids, and if you haven't seen the video I'll try and put a link up in the top right hand corner so you can pop over and see that, once you've seen this video of course. BEA certainly wasn't the only airline operating at the time. As is the case now, there were plenty of them around. But the other main British airline at the time was BOAC, British Overseas Airways Corporation. Now in my previous video about the airport buses, I inadvertently mentioned that BOAC and BEA were rivals. Oh no, I didn't want to do that, no. They're not rivals at all. So BEA, British European Airways, operated the short-haul flights, whilst BOAC operated the long-haul flights. Eventually these two airlines would be merged together to form British Airways. But I guess we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. Like BEA, BOAC also had a central London air terminal. Whilst BEA used the West London Air Terminal, which was in Kensington, BOAC had the Empire Terminal, which was located in Buckingham Palace Road at Victoria. And again, like BEA, BOAC would need a fleet of buses to transfer passengers from the central London Air Terminal through to the actual airport itself. In the early post-war years, they used the same style Commando deck and a half buses as BEA used. But as the popularity of flying increased, aircraft got bigger and these smaller buses couldn't cope with the loads of the passengers coming off the aircraft. BOAC would need bigger buses. These bigger buses would come in the shape of a Harrington Contender. Now these Harrington Contenders were basically integrally built vehicles with comma running units, and sometimes you'll see them described as Harrington Contenders, sometimes you'll see them described as comma Harrington Contenders, and other times you'll see them described as comma Contenders. BOAC ordered 28 of these buses and were the largest customer for this type of vehicle. 19 of these buses that they ordered though were used overseas, and the Harrington Contender was immortalised in diecast by Dinky. Did you have a dinky BOAC Harrington Contender when you was younger? They were a little bit before my time, so I personally didn't. I was more of a Matchbox K15 Londoner kind of kid. That's how I rolled. These buses that were delivered in the mid-1950s looked quite futuristic for the time, and looked very smart in the dark blue BOAC livery. But again, technological progress moved on and aircraft got bigger, and the Harringtons again were proven inadequate for the size of the aircraft. More bigger buses were needed. Now whilst BEA was tied into a maintenance contract with London Transport and really had to buy the vehicles that fitted into their maintenance regime, BOAC didn't have this problem. So when BEA wanted to upgrade the size of its vehicles, it ended up with AEC Routemasters, obviously being heavily influenced by London Transport. And again, as I mentioned in my previous video, these AEC Routemasters were fully seated. There was no space for luggage, and this resulted in the luggage being towed behind in a little trailer. Now don't worry for all those Routemaster fans out there, and I know there's at least one of you, I will be doing a video on these buses at a later date. Now briefly, we are going to leave the hustle and bustle of central London and the airports for a moment. On the 22nd of July 1959, a revolutionary new coach slipped into service. But this was many miles away from London. This was between Preston and Southport, and the revolutionary new coach was a Ribble gay hostess, Leyland Atlantean. Double-decker coaches weren't a new thing, especially for Ribble, but these were much more luxurious than their predecessors. Now, considering these coaches were built at the end of the 1950s, they represented a huge technological leap. Not only did they have air suspension, they also featured reclining seats, a toilet, and refreshments were served on board while the vehicle was on the go. I suppose it's fair to say it was the forerunner of the rapide services that National Express introduced. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about these incredible Atlanteans because you know what I'm going to say. I do plan on doing a video on these at a later date. So if you want to find out more about these buses, stay tuned and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the notification when I make the release on that video. These Leyland Atlanteans regularly ran into London during the 1960s, and Victoria Coach Station is of course a stone's throw away from where the BOAC building was. It's reported that BOAC actually inspected one of these coaches, and this may have influenced their decision to go with the rear-engined Leyland Atlantean. And they were to be of the PDR 1/1 type, with bodywork by MCW, which looks suspiciously like Alexander. The 15 vehicles were delivered between October and November in 1966, and were fitted with coach seats and had 38 seats upstairs but only 16 seats downstairs. Now, the reason for this low seating capacity downstairs was the fact they had a luggage area at the back of the saloon. So rather than tow a trailer, all the luggage was in the lower deck of the bus. Compared to the BEA Routemasters, which were fitted with Green Line style bus seats, which are a little bit thicker and more comfortable than normal bus seats, but are still bus seats, these Leyland Atlanteans must have looked like spaceships. They carried the BOAC livery of blue lower half and white top half. The buses carried the registration numbers LYF304D to LYF318D. In 1971 they were joined by 6 more Leyland Atlanteans, but these ones were a little bit different. They were of PDR 2/1 variety to start off with, and they were fitted with row bodywork to a much more angular design than the original batch of Atlanteans. These buses were registered GML 846J to GML 851J, and the row bodywork seated 41 upstairs and 24 downstairs, again there being a luggage space at the rear of the lower deck. Seating again was in coach seats. Now, I have turned up a piece of information during my research that these Atlanteans were all operated by Hall Brothers of Hounslow on behalf of BOAC. Now, I can't confirm that. If you know otherwise, please let me know. I'd be interested to see if that's true or not. On the 31st of March 1974, British European Airways and British Overseas Airways Corporation were merged together to form British Airways, and both the BEA Routemasters and the BOAC Leyland Atlantean fleet passed into the ownership of British Airways. They would all receive the dark blue and white house colours of British Airways, with, in a lot of cases, appropriate advertising between decks showing various destinations offered by British Airways. Towards the end of the 1970s, passengers were getting more acclimatised to checking in at Heathrow Airport, and the traffic at the central London terminal started to decline. By 1980, the service had been withdrawn, as had the Atlanteans. When the Atlanteans were sold, some of them found use with other operators. Some were used on London sightseeing tours with Cityrama and also with Globus Gateway, while others still journeyed further afield. At least one of the Atlanteans ended up with Swaffham Coachways up in Norfolk, and at least one was to become a filming location dining vehicle. After such a high-profile life, it seemed a little bit of an anticlimax, didn't it? There is one known survivor of these buses, unless of course you know of one that's tucked away somewhere, and I would happily be proven wrong. And that is LYF307D, which used to live at Brooklands and looked a little bit down at hill at one point, which was a bit of a shame and rather sad, as not only was it an important vehicle and the sole representative of its type, at some point in its life as well it had also been lovingly restored to full BOAC livery. And yes, I am a realist, and I do realise that bus preservation sometimes doesn't necessarily mean forever. But it's still rather sad, isn't it, when a beautifully restored vehicle kind of loses its way and ends up parked up somewhere and abandoned and goes all horrible and mouldy and yucky. Or worse still, disappears out of preservation to be turned into a trendy glamping unit. Don't get me started on that, because I'll just end up with a headache. And at one point, some of my buses were living outside and they did get a bit faded, but I did always try and wash them and keep them as clean as I possibly could. But now the majority of my fleet is living undercover, and I'm sure in a big place like Brooklands, they could have found an undercover spot for this beautiful bus, couldn't they? Even if it had received the minimum of maintenance, a monthly wash or so, that would have made such a difference, wouldn't it? Unfortunately, in some of these museums, and I'm not saying this is the case with Brooklands at all, but there can be internal politics that stop the simplest of tasks being done. And that's a great shame, because it's just the vehicles that suffer. Anyway, I will get down off my soapbox now. My own personal encounter with LYF 307D, and indeed any of these BOAC Atlanteans, was many years ago when I was about 8 years old. At that time, the bus was living at Cotsford and it was fully restored. And my dad took me around the airfield with my stepmum to show me all the airliners, the impressive VC-10 and the Bristol Britannia, but I think he might have been a little bit rather disappointed that I was more enthralled with a Leyland Atlantean. Somewhere in the Jake family archives there is a picture of me looking fit to burst with excitement stood in front of this BOAC Leyland Atlantean, and as I say, that is my only real contact with these buses. Now, the future looks like it's going to be a little bit brighter for LYF 307D because it's recently been taken on by a member of the Bromley Bus Preservation Group. How did I miss that? I don't know. And if anyone can turn it around and make it shiny and good again, it's those lads. And as for the old BOAC terminal in Buckingham Palace Road, well, what happened to that, I hear you ask? Well, that became the National Audit Office and is still standing there, and is a fine example of Art Deco elegance. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this look at a very interesting piece of our transport heritage and history. And when you hear people complain about their journey to the airport now, it could sometimes be a lot more complicated. Although maybe the old days were the better days. Who knows? I love to read your comments and your thoughts on all this in the comments section down below underneath this video. Please remember this is a potted history and I have tried to cram in as much information as I can into a 15-minute or 14-minute long video. If there's anything I've left out that's important to you, I do apologise, but once again, please comment down below and let me know. I'd love reading your comments. But if you did like this video, please like and share it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss that video about the BEA Routemaster buses. And maybe I might bring the story right up to date with the story of the London Transport Airbuses as well. If this is something that appeals to you, you know what to do. Go down to the comments and let me know. Thank you ever so much for watching. All money raised goes towards the upkeep and maintenance of the Southern Counties Omnibus Collection vehicles. My name's Jake Bamford. Bye for now.